Welcome to Human. I am here with Olga Lautman. She is a senior fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis. She also is an expert on what's happening inside the Kremlin, something that we all want to know more about, as well as Russia's overseas operations. She was a creator and host of a podcast called Kremlin File. So, Olga, I am glad that you're here, and I just want to jump right into it. And I want to start out by talking about something that happened even before Trump and Putin met in Anchorage. So, Putin gives an award to Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. This is according to CBS. This is an award that is meant to go to a senior CIA officer. Some of my exclusive reporting showed that this officer, the deputy director of digital innovation in the CIA, she had been distraught because she didn't know where her son was. And he had mental health problems. And one of a person who was close to her told me, quote, she was desperate to get information. She didn't know what was going on. There were days you could just see her. Best I could put it is staring at a wall. It was tough to do your job while you're wondering where your son is. Well, her son ended up dying in Ukraine, fighting with the Russians, though his peers believed that it was more to get a Russian passport than for ideology. But Putin gives this award through Witkoff to this woman who has lost her son, we learned back in April. I had wondered, okay, is Putin going to spin this into some disinformation? But this just seemed to have been a mind fuck from the get-go. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this was definitely an intelligence operation and frankly made my blood boil. The fact that Witkoff, as an American, did not say thank you, but no thank you, and that took this award and from the latest reporting delivered it to her. Look, the CBS reported this is the Order of London. Now, the Order of London is something that collapsed with, the hellish Soviet Union. So it's a non-existent reward. I checked the Kremlin's website. There were no decrees signed, although, I'm not sure when. If Putin would have issued an official decree, when he would have done it. But this, I mean, was one humiliation for our CIA. This is the first, goal of it. To the Order of Lenin, if this is the, quote unquote award that was delivered, this was handed to people for excellent service to the state, to the mother country. And the fact here, I was like, is this award going honestly for the CIA officer, or is it going for Trump? Because at the same time, Trump, has been delivering so many things to the Kremlin that he really is making their life, much, much easier when it comes to running their intelligence operations and just their strategies in the called global scheme. But it's reprehensible because, frankly, in a normal reality, Witkoff should have left this award there. The Kremlin obviously took advantage, and again, like I said, wanted to humiliate the CIA officer because this is a personal tragedy. Whatever we think of, the fact that her son, fought to kill Ukrainians, it still is a personal tragedy to her. And frankly, I would like to know even how he got recruited because the Kremlin has a history, going back to the Soviet Union of targeting people's children. I mean, this is a very, very long tactic, KGB tactic. And here, he could have been targeted to begin with, indoctrinated, pulled over to Russia, sent over to
Yeah.
the front lines.
I did.
And
I
that's
did. I did ask the U.S. official who, with knowledge of the matter, about that. Could this have been all done to recruit him because of his mother's position? But he had been traveling with nomads. He'd been part of these social media platforms where young people get together and roam around. And it was this person's belief that his mother and that association was likely not there.
okay.
Uh, but yeah. I mean, certainly it's a advantageous to the Kremlin now because it is a narrative that they can clearly build up.
And also, don't forget, anyone who comes into the country, they do a full sweep. So they know any person who is crossing into their border, who their parents are, what is on their social media. I mean, it is a surveillance state. So the minute you even apply for a visa to get into Russia, they have a full file on exactly who you are, who your family is, what your social media is, what your leanings are, and do a full assessment.
Oh, so when he got into Russia, that might have been the moment he
Absolutely.
was targeted.
They
Interesting.
ab absolutely. There is no way anyone can cross a border into Russia without, FSB doing a full sweep to see who this person is, and that's it. And then the minute anything flags up that potentially he is connected, immediately, it would have been the file would have been pushed up because he would have been a person of interest.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the agency expressed deep sorrow and deep support for her. Let's move on to another development that came this week, where the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, announced that she is going to reduce what she describes as bloat in the ODNI, attempting to cut it nearly 50%. I've been tracking an office there, the Foreign Malign Influence Center. So a couple weeks ago, people were worried about what would happen in the reorg, but they believed that they were going to be relocated to the National Counterintelligence and Security Center because they have historical ties to that. And now we know from a press release that this is one of the programs that has been targeted to end. Unclear if all of them will be axed or if some of them will be relocated. But this is a center that would alert the United States to Russian as well as Chinese and Iranian disinformation campaigns, especially around elections. They would contact the targets privately. Sometimes they would put out public messages. Gabbard writing in her statement, quote, elements within the National Intelligence Council and National Counterintelligence and Security Center already monitor efforts by foreign entities to influence the American public. FMIC and its predecessor entities were used by the previous administration to justify the suppression of free speech and to censor political opposition. She also suggests that this was potentially an effort to weaponize intelligence, but did not provide any evidence to back any of this up. So, that being said, this is a place that was alerting the country to Russian disinformation. What would the Kremlin be thinking? To what extent does a move like this benefit the Kremlin, especially when we think about the midterm elections in 2026?
Well, the fact that Tulsi Gabbard did this is not surprising because she has had very Kremlin views. I mean, going back over a decade, specifically with what happened in Syria, what happened in Crimea after the illegal annexation and the invasion of Ukraine. But honestly, with this particular move, I wouldn't put it as much on her as Trump, only because from the first week that Trump came into office, he literally started disarming and dismantling every agency to protect the United States, specifically if this agency or task force dealt with Russia. So you had the capture unit disbanded, you had the foreign election interference in CISA disbanded or minimized. It was minimized, and they were discussing disbanding it. Literally anything that had to do with holding Russia accountable. And again, this is interesting because Trump is focused on Russia because for over a decade, we've seen Russia's attacks on our elections. But Trump, is disarming America. And he has to remember that China and Iran have been involved in every single election as well. So I'm not sure, even though he is assisting Russia with this, because now they have free reign inside of our agencies, and they can carry out their operations for election and disinformation operations, and frankly their whole information warfare against the United States with impunity. He still has to remember that China and Iran are not his friends. Now, as far as for what the Kremlin thinks, I mean, they have been celebrating since February when Pam Bondi walked into the Department of Justice and removed, anything that had to do with holding Russia accountable. I mean, even at a point within the State Department, they actually pulled funding from Yale University that was tracking stolen children from Ukraine. And only when it got attention, and the Yale study wasn't tracking it just because, they have nothing better to do. They were tracking it because they were preparing this information to send it to European law enforcement. And there was fear among even a few Republicans that this database was seized from Yale and that it was destroyed, which led them to write a letter, which finally led to the conclusion that the database still exists, and Marco Rubio had to restore funding so they can send this information over to European law enforcement for genocide and war crimes and other investigations in Europe against Russia. But this is what they have been doing. I mean, there is not one thing that they have done to protect America. Opposite, they're rolling back anything that, all our safeguards to protect the country from foreign interference, from foreign cyber attacks, from disinformation operations. Anything that is related to protecting the country, they pretty much either dismantled or rolled back.
Well, it's gotten very conflated with Republicans who say that this is suppressing conservative speech. And that brings me to the Global Engagement Center, which was exposing influence operations inside the State Department, meaning that State Department officials were doing that work, looking specifically at Russia, but as well as China and Iran, because it's always those three. And now, as I've been reporting over the last few days, there are people who used to work there who are very concerned that their names and the names of young people who they secretly funded to counter Russian disinformation, as well as Iranian and Chinese, but that those names could be exposed in the GEC files, which is basically going to be like the Twitter files. It's going to release certain emails. And I've gone to the State Department a few times now. Is this going to be redacted? Are you going to protect people's names in what you release? And I haven't heard anything back, which is uncharacteristic. Usually the State Department responds back to my requests. So when I think about something like that, I'm trying to get your sense on how closely the Russians would be tracking that and to what extent they would try to leverage this in the name. I mean, Marco Rubio has said that the best way to fight disinformation is with free speech. For them, it's all about free speech, even though they're also revoking security clearances of people who were critical of Trump, which should technically also be free speech. But in any case, that was a run-on question. I am so sorry for asking you it that way, but your turn.
Well, I could tell you the Kremlin is celebrating, and more so, they will be looking for these names, which will definitely endanger the people who worked on this. Um, what people don't understand is that information warfare, propaganda, disinformation, this is the strongest weapon that Russia has. We've all seen, their military, quote unquote, and how the only reason that they are, I wouldn't say successful, but that they're making some kind of gains and haven't fully been defeated in Ukraine is because of the fact that their military strategy is to target specifically civilians. So people who are sleeping at night in apartment buildings, hospitals, maternity hospitals, daycares, children's centers. So this is their military, but part of their military doctrine is information warfare. This is something I've worked on over a decade, from when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014, because they primed, the groundwork with these disinformation operations, propaganda. This is when you saw a lot of activity of them pulling in Western shills to carry their operations out to their audiences, co-opting journalists. That time frame between I would say 12 to 2016 was extremely active to counter any kind of response for Russia for their illegal invasion of a sovereign country. So this is their strongest weapon. Um, I always said in 2016, when Russia attacked our elections, had they, thrown a bomb into New York or Washington, D.C., this would unite the country. But the fact that they, for one decade prior, sat and primed laid the groundwork for their operations, understanding all the vulnerabilities and inside America, polarizing Americans, to the point that like family members weren't speaking with each other. This, by the way, is everything. What happened 2016 to now, and what is currently happening in our country, is everything that happened in Ukraine in the 2000s. Ukraine was used as a testing ground for many of Russia's hybrid warfare operations, including information warfare. So, for Russia, anyone involved in countering disinformation or their propaganda is of interest, is targeted, Russia puts out lies about them. So this is something that they'll be very interested in. Frankly, it is honestly beyond, I don't understand, because this is something the United States should have been a leader of. PSYOPs, countering disinformation, even take Trump out of the picture. This is something we should have been on after the annexation of Crimea and the invasion of Donbass occupation. This is something we should have been focused on. And I never understood where the intelligence community was on this. And finally, when we started catching up a few years ago, it didn't have the same effect, because then what happened is that us pushing back on foreign information warfare looked as if it somehow got repackaged as this is an attack on the far right. And this is the big problem that we had here. And now you see the United States doing the same inside of Europe and threatening European countries because they are countering Russia's disinformation warfare. And they're actually, finally catching on, because also they were behind, and they finally are putting mechanisms into place. And it is no, wonder that the State Department is targeting them, that JD Vance is targeting them, and you see the whole U.S. government, instead of being supportive and assisting in this, that they are doing everything to basically shame it. And it's a big problem. I mean, the GEC is something, again, they weren't the most effective. I remember the good old days when we actually had the other version under the State Department during the Cold War. They were effective,
The
but
U.S.
they still,
Information Agency.
yes, they were extremely effective, but the GEC still did a good job. And I mean, it's again, we are disarmed right now, and the most important thing is for the American people now to take it upon themselves, because it's up to us now to fight this disinformation, to fact check everything, and to make sure that whatever we are putting out, is not acted on by emotion, but by verifiable fact checked information.
I think one of the issues from 2014, the slow start, was that the United States underestimated Russia's ability to sow distrust and chaos in the country. And then there were competing priorities inside the State Department, whereby maybe we want to work with Russia to fight ISIS in Syria. Remember, that was the moment that Putin came to Assad's aid. It was pretty clear that he was going to be there boosting Assad, but there were some inside the State Department who thought that maybe doing work like that would jeopardize this other priority. And so there were competing priorities. I think that if they were to look back and go back in time, maybe there would be a different approach. To me, one of the biggest changes in disinformation and the debunking came with the Hunter Biden laptop story. All of a sudden, this narrative built that we in this country are suppressing legitimate information on the eve of an election. And look at the way the government is talking to social media. And that information then was cherry picked into these Twitter files, which some people see as being definitive proof of collusion and others see as being a total nothing burger.
And the thing with the Hunter Biden laptop, I don't know on the US side, and apparently, there were parts that were real, but I can tell you that there was a Hunter Biden laptop shopped around in Ukraine prior to one making its way in the Washington, D.C. or Virginia, whatever, that repair shop. So I was monitoring literally Russia's attack, 2020 election attack, as I was the 2016. In 2016, Russia used its own operatives for the attack. In 2020, they used Russian agents inside of Ukraine as cutouts. So you had the Dirkat, who was a GRU agent, you had Telizhenko, and you had several people leading, this operation, which frankly, I was monitoring inside of Ukraine every time, Giuliani or someone stepped foot into Ukraine. I knew exactly who they were meeting with, what they were, approximately discussing. And I do know that there was a laptop with information on Hunter Biden being shopped around in Ukraine, specifically with this. But the bigger point that I want people to understand, and this is what the West had a very difficult time understanding, that after the Soviet Union collapsed, there were a lot of hardliners who just never could accept this collapse. And this is not just Putin, there is a whole slew of them. And they, basically vowed revenge. And when Putin came into power, he first organized inside the country, and basically got control of all the agencies, put all his loyalists in each agency and state company and semi-state company to have control. But the ultimate goal has always been, one, to restore, if not even expand, the Russian Empire or the Soviet, quote unquote empire, and two, to get revenge because the Russian hardliners have always blamed the United States and Europe for the collapse of the Soviet Union. Not that, they had a useless 10-year Afghan war that they thought they were going to walk into Afghanistan and, and that's it. It's only Afghanistan, and ended up having horrific losses. Not the Politburo's, how you call it, steps that they took, the corruption and, not being able to have state funds and sustain the country. So this is one thing people really need to understand, that, irrelevant of what regime it is, that their ultimate goal, there is a very large section of hardliners inside of Russia, and they will do everything to seek revenge. And that revenge means imploding target countries, and that revenge means subverting democracies. This is what they've been working on. We saw this in 2007 after they went after Estonia. We saw this in 2008 when they invaded Georgia. We saw them propping up Assad, the invasion of Ukraine, the attack on every election. I mean, by the time that the 2016 election happened, we were the 28th country that Russia attacked their elections. 28th. So unlike, the Republicans who like to make it that it was just, a democratic, hoax of this attack, we were the 28th. Poland was a test case of the attack that happened to us in 2016. They used the same tactics, what's called Watergate. No, not Watergate, Waitergate, where they put surveillance devices to tape the party in office, and then started disseminating basically, and also carried out a cyber attack and started disseminating fabricated information or semi-fabricated. Um, on top of priming with their information operations. So this is one thing that is key, that a lot of people don't understand, that, here we thought we won the Cold War, and that people, here we were focused on the war of terror and everyone kind of got reassigned. For Russia, they were obsessively planning and waiting for the right time to start their operations and also to start their land grabs in order to restore, like I said, the Russian Empire, Soviet Empire.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of information in there that is new to my ears as well. But it is very well known and documented by the US intelligence community that Putin wants to restore Russia to the Soviet greatness, and that this was the real tragedy that he felt of the modern era. This week, we also saw Trump cite Putin on why he didn't like mail in ballots. He said in an interview with Fox's Sean Hannity that Putin told him, quote, "It's impossible to have mail-in voting and have honest elections." For him to cite Putin where elections are not free and fair, uh, take a crack at that one?
When I saw this, I didn't know if I mean, I literally laughed and wanted to bang my head. I was like, are we like really in a completely weird, bizarre timeline? Can we get back? Yeah, taking election advice from Putin is not something, that any normal person should do. Besides the fact that Putin has attacked every single US election, specifically, I know the 2016, 2020, 2024. Um, he's attacked every European election. He's interfered in elections across Africa and
Is he
Middle
just
East.
but is he citing Putin because this is a mechanism for him to have some legitimacy in his own viewpoint on mail-in voting? I mean, he was against it in 2020. He seemed to push it in 2024, but he's back to being against it now.
If you were to ask me how this went down, Trump walked into the room in their meeting. Putin probably, knowing he is a KGB thug, knowing, all the sensitive points to get Trump started, like the 2020 election was stolen, the mail-in ballots, and everything else that Trump rambles. It's not really that hard to find, ways to target and to to basically get to him.
So basically,
So
this
if you
was
were
Putin currying favor by using some of the sort of like trinkets that he knew Trump would attach to.
Yeah, I don't know as much as currying favor, but just, instead, because Putin, like I said, is a KGB thug. This specifically was supposed to be about Russia getting the hell out of Ukraine, or at least that's how I view it. Trump, wants to hand away Ukraine to Russia. But for Putin, obviously he needed any other distraction to get Trump off course, because Putin has no, desire to end his genocidal war in Ukraine. So, of course, he probably talks about 2020 elections, mail in ballots. Oh, we should talk about the New START Treaty and, everything and anything to get off topic. I mean, from what I read, Putin even brought in, maps from 1600s going through territory, historical territory. So anything and
I'm sure
everything.
that would have been really fun for Trump to listen to. I'm sure he really liked that.
Can you imagine? I actually joked because, I've never seen European leaders scramble this quick, especially in August. I mean, in August, I deal a lot with Europe. I mean, it's extremely hard to get them to focus. They're usually on vacation month. And the fact they scrambled to US in like under 48 hours, I was like, well, I joked to someone like that Putin probably in one of the maps, showed Finland and the Baltic, some other countries, Poland, and then said, "Oh yeah, and then I'm going to take this back, and we need to swap this and whatnot." And probably that's why the Finnish president was like, "No, you're not giving my country away," and that's why he was the first to come here. But I mean, so back to mail-in ballots. I personally think that, as a distraction tactic, that Putin decided to have a conversation, and Trump being Trump decided to repeat, "Oh, look, even Putin says we shouldn't have mail-in ballots." I mean, but the whole thing is so absurd. I can't even believe we have to discuss it because, again, this is a man. I wrote an article, and just so people understand, he got into power by blowing up apartment buildings and
We're
killing
talking
over
about Putin now, not Trump.
Putin, not Trump. Trump hasn't blown anything up, thank goodness. Putin got into power blowing up apartment buildings. Um, and setting off a second Chechen war. It was a two-act thing that happened in 1999 that
And using
Novaya
domestic
Gazeta,
intelligence services, the
yes,
FSB, to do this work.
yes. And at the time, Patrushev was the head of FSB. Novaya Gazeta, who's at the time was an amazing investigative outlet. Now they had to leave Russia. They were onto this, as well as Alexander Litvinenko, who knew that it was security services who created this false flag operations between what happened with the blowing up of the apartment buildings and what happened with the invasion in Dagestan a few weeks prior in order to start the Second Chechen War to elevate Putin. So he got into power through a set of terrorist attacks. This is not a man you take election advice from. Then, by the time his term expired, he, did a switcheroo, which Americans should really pay attention, where he made Medvedev president, he became prime minister. Trump even floated doing something like this with Vance, that he'll make Vance president and he'll become vice president. Um, and then from there, there's never been any fair or free elections. People have, I remember documenting a case, someone died at a polling station. Not died, I'm sorry, they survived. They were poisoned at a polling station. I cannot tell you, I must have hundreds and hundreds of videos of the ballot stuffing, of the carousel voting from these elections, from, over the past decade. So this is not one man that you really cite. I'm not sure what Trump is doing, and I'm not sure how comfortable the Republican Party is with Trump taking advice from a dictator.
It's interesting to see how what gets said gets used in different ways by each party. I mean, Putin and the Russians have also gone hard for a while, though they've dropped off more recently in saying that Zelensky is an illegitimate president because they haven't had elections in all this time. They haven't had elections because they're at war, and that goes against their laws. But interestingly, when Zelensky was at the White House on Monday, Trump joked about that. And he said, basically implying, so if the US is also at war, does that mean that we don't have to have elections? And I'm wondering if sometimes when Trump says things like that, the left, the liberal media goes crazy. Look, this is what's going to happen. But it almost seems like Trump really likes to make fun of people who are so fearful of democracy ending, and then he almost does it to just make them feel uncomfortable, that it's just a form of entertainment for him, and then the right kind of joins him in enjoying this moment. I mean, I don't know. That's
I I put more into it because, frankly, his threats, even though he's doing it, I honestly, when he made that comment, I watched it. To me, I think he was just like entertaining. Here's another thought to put in the back of my head. I would take him serious because I think too many people don't take him serious. Meanwhile, I do my tracker, documenting every daily thing that is happening. And there has been a lot of focus on dismantling our election infrastructure and Trump's attempts to take over states. Trump's attempts to get to the voter rolls from, like, I believe now over a dozen states. His attempts to get to the voting machine. So, frankly, I personally think Trump does want to stay in office as long as he wants to, until he feels like he needs to go. I would not, minimize with him with this, only because I've seen, and it's nothing, it's no conspiracy about it. Trump has always, whether it was, back in the day in New York, I'm a New Yorker, back in the day where he had, a favorable outlook towards the Italian mafia because he had to do business with them for his real estate. Everyone had to do business with the mob in New York for, what if you were in construction, or whether just he prefers. I mean, he showed us he loved Orban, he loved Kim Jong Un, although recently doesn't seem Kim Jong Un is answering any of his love letters. He likes people who have ultimate control of a country, who can silence press, who can silence opposition. So I would be, with that part, I would. And as far as, with Ukraine, this disinformation that Ukraine, that Zelensky is the dictator. Look, if even then, I wouldn't agree with it. I mean, it depends how it would be. But if the US had, 800 drones a night and missiles falling on it every single night, day and night, how exactly are you supposed to run elections? I'm just curious. Like, how do you go campaign? How do you put together an election? How do people even go to vote? What you have to go, worry that you're going to go vote under missile strikes, so the
Right.
fact
And
that
it
Hmm?
would also be an opportunity for the Russians to try to bring in somebody who was pro-Russian. They would spend a lot of their resources in doing that. It wouldn't just be on the battlefield anymore. It would be at the polling stations,
Again,
actually. Yeah.
this is again 20 years. The first Orange Revolution in Ukraine, just, so people know, happened because of this, because Russia interfered in elections. Not only did they interfere in Ukrainian elections and had sent Paul Manafort to manage Yanukovych in the system at the time, in 2003, they sent him over, but also they poisoned the opposition candidate who was pro-Western, who ended up winning after the Supreme Court stepped in. But this was exactly what the Orange Revolution was. So again, Russia has decades of practice inside of Ukraine when it comes to interfering inside of elections.
And I want to make sure that we have time to talk about a few more things here, Olga. So let's talk about Zelensky on Wednesday announcing that Ukraine will start mass producing this new long range missile, the FP5 Flamingo. This has a range of about 1,800 miles, accuracy of 45 feet, payload of about 2,500 pounds. The next day, President Trump, that is, writes, it's very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. It's like a great team in sports that has a fantastic defense, but is not allowed to play offense. There's no chance of winning. I mean, I've spoken to so many people in the national security community who were very critical of the Biden administration for not allowing Ukraine to use U.S. weapons to strike deep into Russia. And that is a moment where it looks like Trump is saying, go do your thing, go do your thing. So maybe he isn't necessarily as loyal to Putin and Russia when he makes a comment like that. What are your thoughts on that?
Hey, when it comes to Trump and Putin and Ukraine, frankly, my thoughts are like, I can't wait for him to move on to something because he keeps cycling around. He bothers us, Ukrainians, and then goes to the Middle East and goes to tariffs and goes to something else, cycles back around to Ukraine and then whatnot. So I don't know what's in his head yesterday, and I really can't comment. As far as Biden, I was one of those critical. I mean, the fact that weapons were withheld for so long, the fact there were 6-month discussions, should we send these tanks or these HIMARS or F-16s? I mean, it really did give Russia an advantage. Not that they, moved forward on the field as much as that they were able to really fortify their positions across the front line. Had the U.S. and Europe moved quicker, we would not be here today because, at the time, Russia wouldn't have. As far as Ukraine, Ukrainians very clearly understand, and I don't mean to be rude, but this has been betrayal and this ping pong foreign policy or yo yo foreign policy that they have to go through every time there's a new leader, either in Germany or in the United States. They understand that it is extremely hard to fully trust, the rest of the world when it comes to securing their sovereignty. Um, and so they did make, this one of the core things after the full scale invasion to do as much as they can to start producing their own weapons and their own drones and new technologies to, protect their country. Um, and I don't mean this in any disrespect. I am beyond grateful for everything the United States has sent to Ukraine and Europe has sent. But the bottom line is that it's Ukrainians who are dying every single day to hold back the Russians. And the Russians have made it clear, even before the full scale invasion, they have made it clear that if and when they have Ukraine, when in their head, not in reality, that they do need to get the Baltics back because they call them artificial countries. Now you're talking about NATO countries. Recently, they've been over the past few years, hey, call it saying that they're going to get revenge for Finland, for Poland, for their acts during in assisting Ukraine. So like I said, Ukraine has been very focused on drone productions. I think they can run circles right now with other Western countries when it comes to drones and the technology being used and that they're developing in drones. And the same thing with weapons. And this is the smartest thing because if you want to secure your country, you need to be able to manufacture your weapons in the case another country decides to walk away and say, this is not in our national security interest. So therefore, we don't want nothing to do, with supplying weapons to Ukraine.
Before we get into security guarantees, and that is a very complex conversation, can you give me a sense of how Russian intelligence services have changed or maintained since we have seen Trump's second term begin? And not saying that the two are related. I'm not at all implying that, but I'm interested to understand how, based on where we are with the United States not providing this deep military support, uh, for a moment pausing intelligence sharing with Ukraine, Trump trying to be an interlocutor between Putin and Zelensky. How have Russia's intelligence services responded to all of this?
So there are two things I'll focus on. On a bigger scheme of things, Russia's intelligence services now have focused and reshifted specifically on Europe because they want to do everything to break the alliance up. So right now, their main focus is European countries breaking the alliance up. They are running a lot of operations in the United States, to basically try to finish off NATO and U.S. commitment to NATO and U.S., commitment to the transatlantic treaties and partnerships and whatnot. So they have been working on this and basically making sure, they want the US completely out of the picture when it comes to Europe. And now they've been shifted over to, interfering in every election and running disinformation operations, fear mongering operations inside of their target European countries, which include France, Germany, Poland. Pretty much everything. So that is that. What I will tell you, the second part to this is that, as much as they are extremely grateful. I mean, they couldn't have asked for more when they tried to help Trump win last time. And in 2024, they did run operations. I mean, the FBI had it documented very well that they were using AI videos and fake news and everything else. Did they have as much effect of Trump, winning like in 2016? I don't think so, because this, I think, actually Americans, for some reason, looked and said, this is exactly what we want, and voted for him back. But they couldn't have asked for more since they came back, because he literally is delivering everything to them, on a gold plate. Now, then comes Iran. This was the most interesting thing I've ever seen. Iran, Israel starts bombing Iran. Russia starts frantically trying to get Trump on their side to stay out of it. And between their press and the Telegram chatter and just everything, you saw them pulling. I mean, Putin, I believe, made two phone calls, one on Trump's birthday and another phone call, to try to prevent U.S. from getting in with Israel to hit Iran. After even the night that the United States bombed Iran, hey, Claude, you started that night seeing the shift inside of Russian media and inside of Russian chatter on Telegram. And there they got extremely angry with Trump. I mean, they were livid. And from there, you started seeing them run operations. They have not stopped. And it was beyond fascinating, because for every member of Congress who said, oh, I pray for Israel, I pray for this, the United States, you would see 2,000 comments of bots, trolls, and, their shills who are pushing back against it. And this is the first time I've seen them run these type of operations against Trump, versus before they would use it against Democrats. Then come Epstein, they started really pouring fuel on the, what is it? Fuel on the fire.
Yeah.
They started pouring fuel on the fire, and you would see them playing both sides, because again, their interest is not Trump. Trump is a vehicle for them to implode America, to weaken America, to remove America as a superpower in the world, because Putin wants Russia to be elevated as the superpower. And you saw them operating on both sides, on all social media, where they are pushing Trump Epstein conspiracies, even in Telegram. I don't recall, Epstein ever being mentioned by Telegram accounts. Even there, they were discussing Epstein. I'm like, my goodness, imagine them taking a break from Russia's genocidal war to discuss Epstein. So they've been running operations. All of this came to a stop last week, right before the summit. A few days before, this is where it kind of, calmed down for a bit. And recently, I haven't, honestly, the past few days, checked to see after, because so far Trump's been, pretty much doing everything that they want. We'll see what happens now. We'll get to security guarantees, but as of now, it was very interesting to see them really like using their, you know, troll factory against Trump, invoking Epstein religiously. And also, they're running a lot of anti Semitic, anti Israel operations on all social media right now. And every time you see America serves Israel, America, Israel first, all of this is part of their ops, where you'll see like a million comments, Israel first, to forget America, and things like that.
Very fascinating to hear that the Russian intelligence services have been behind operations against Trump. And it makes me wonder if the Trump administration is aware of that and how much that would bother Trump personally to see. We have seen, yeah, feel free to say more on that.
I just wanted to say, and it is very interesting, and I wrote about this after the election, and it just shows you what they value. While Trump is running around, Putin is my best friend. He loves me. He thinks I'm the smartest man. Do you know within 24 hours after Trump won the election, what was being blasted on, ceiling to floor screens in Russian studios? Melania Trump practically naked. This is what they thought of Trump. And then immediately, you had Patrushev, who's behind the 99 apartment building bombings, former FSB chief, and Medvedev, the former president, vice president, troll of Putin, um, Putin himself and a few others who basically invoked Trump's assassination and basically sending him a message like the mafia, like, we hope your security services, can protect you and you don't get assassinated. This is what they were doing, literally after he won election, which to me was also fascinating because I would think in 2016, was up that night and watched how Duma popped open champagne bottles to, welcome. And here, this is how they, brought him back.
Yeah, it's also interesting in the fact that there was Trump saying, overheard on the microphone, telling Macron, I think he, as in Putin, wants to make a deal for me. Do you understand that? As crazy as it sounds. So the dynamics of it all are really, really something, and something that I think people will be writing about and thinking about for decades to come. So I guess we don't have too much longer to talk about security guarantees, but Trump seemed open to air support of European forces. Then, according to a Politico report, Pentagon policy chief Elbridge Colby walks this back a bit. Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, says Moscow won't agree with collective security guarantees negotiated without Russia. Also, hey, let's let China be involved in this too. And my mind goes back to 1994 with the Budapest Memorandum, when nobody agrees on the details. And there's literally one document in Ukrainian that uses the word guarantees, and then a document in English that says assurances. And are we approaching that moment again?
Well, let me just pull back a drop when it comes to Russia and Ukraine and why this is going nowhere. Let's start at the beginning. Putin has transformed his economy to a war economy. He cannot stop this war. If he stops the war, stagflation will be on steroids inside of Russia. Already, they're doing everything to the point of classifying regular jobs data and economic data because they don't want people to know how bad it is, and have actually began addressing, what is happening inside the economy. I mean, trying to prepare people for what is coming. So that's number one. Number two, in Russian mentality and Soviet mentality, which Putin is a Soviet baby, um, any leader who doesn't accomplish their mission, bloody imperialist mission, gets overthrown, or assassinated. He knows this very well. Every single person in, the Soviet Union or Russia knows exactly, what happens to people who don't fulfill their missions. In Gorbachev's case, with Afghanistan, the country just collapsed. But everybody knows. So Putin has no intention of ending this war. Next, prior to last June, I believe it was, not this June, a year and a half ago almost, um, Macron made a statement that he was thinking of sending, maybe Polish and French troops, a few troops inside of Ukraine. Russia immediately, and again, no one cares what Russia has to say, and frankly, the West should do what they need to do. But from Russia's point of view, they immediately said, if any international force steps foot into Ukraine, any part of Ukraine, they will see this as an act of war against Russia. Again, we don't care what Russia says, but this is their thought. So the fact that they would think, sit down. Now we're talking specifically the framework that Trump is presenting. The fact that they would sit behind the table and, agree to NATO-like or NATO country soldiers being inside of Ukraine is laughable. Number three, they have spent prior to the 2022 full-scale invasion, they spent over a year and a half. And mind you, what they've said about Ukrainians goes back, to Stalin. Stalin killed 5 to 7 million Ukrainians during the Holodomor genocide. But going back a few years before the full-scale invasion, they needed to lay the groundwork for, their information operations inside of Russia, so people would support and kind of rally behind Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So they started around 2020, I believe, going after Zelensky, that he's committing genocide against the Russian people, the Nazi nonsense, and all of this. Now, you tell me how, after spending years of indoctrinating people and brainwashing them to believe that Zelensky is not a legitimate leader, that he is a Nazi, which he's Jewish, so that's laughable on its own right. How he, the president of, superior Russia, can sit at the same table with a Nazi and discuss anything. So the fact that there's going to be a bilateral is laughable, because I can't even picture how Russian media, again, if it's instructed, they'll spin everything. And there have been constant contradictions. Well, even with the mutiny, 1 minute Prigozhin's a traitor, next minute he's good. But it would be extremely hard for, them to say, oh, never mind that Nazi stuff and, everything we said about Zelensky committing genocide against Russian speakers, which is a lie. Well, Putin's going to go and sit down with him. And this is why when Trump said about bilateral, Lavrov immediately, it wasn't even 24 hours, pushed back and said, yes, we're discussing, elevating the talks between higher level, delegations, not Putin. So I personally don't see a bilateral happening. I don't see a trilateral happening. We're going to continue going back. So this is on Russia's side. And just to finish off on Ukraine's side, Zelensky alone does not have the power to cede any land. Ukraine is a country, a sovereign one. It does have a constitution. It's not a banana republic. People have to follow the constitution. And if you want to move any territory to another country, they have their own mechanisms within the Constitution, which requires Parliament approval and whatnot. So Zelensky alone cannot make the decision, I'll hand this off, I'll do this. He can't do this. Number two, the civil society runs the country. Unlike in the United States, where everybody looks to the president as their leader, Ukraine, because of everything in the history, civil society makes the decisions of what is acceptable. And when their leader does something that is not acceptable, they end up, the route of Yanukovych, fleeing to Russia. So civil society has a say. And I can tell you, I've worked on this personally for years. Russia has stolen over 21,000 children. Russian officials have said that they've taken 700,000 children. That's by their accounts. We are not allowing anything to do with anything until these children are returned. These are stolen children. This is genocide. You are not allowed to take, groupings of population and remove them from their country and move them into the aggressor country. And now they're trafficking children online, which New York Post even, brought on to the attention, and it was like big news in New York Post.
And as
They
Zelensky
actually
pointed out, Melania gave a letter to Putin about bringing back the children.
Yeah, and this is something that we've worked on. We are collecting evidence. You have Ukrainian organizations who have day and night worked to track every single stolen child. We know of 21,000. And like I said, Russia, you have accounts on their end that quote unquote in their twisted had saved 700,000 to 500,000. Someone else, another government officials said around 150,000. Regardless, one child is too much. 21,000 children is insane. And for people to understand, this isn't just kidnapping. Russia takes these kids, puts them through a re-education camp, strips their Ukrainian identity. You're not allowed to speak Ukrainian. They erase your Ukrainian national anthem and they reprogram you as a Russian and then hand you off to Russian families. And there's a lot of torture as evidenced by both Russia Insider and, Russian investigative outlets, Ukrainian investigative outlets, State Department reports, prior to this, whatever the State Department is. Um, and European agencies, I mean, who have a lot of investigation of what's happening with the children, as well as the Hague also is working. Obviously, they issued an arrest warrant on Putin, and this was only probably 5% of the evidence that they have transferred from Ukrainian prosecutor office on these children. We're not letting this go. I mean, if Americans think, yeah, we'll give away Montana and this and that and leave, 20 plus thousand children, American children behind somewhere. I mean, if they think, oh, it's fine, that's up to them. But as far as for Ukrainians, no one is letting anything go. And this is why we're going to continue going in these circles. And we're going to go nowhere, as I said, in January and February and March and April, and every time Ukraine comes back to Trump's, agenda.
So essentially, there's not going to be a real conversation about security guarantees in your view because there's so many other aspects of this that are not going to be resolved. In fact, they're escalating. And essentially, what we've seen is that now Zelensky, after having pissed off Trump in the Oval Office back in February, understands that he needs to say certain things and act a certain way. And they're both Putin and Zelensky are basically acting as though they want to have a path forward, but they're just going to continue waging their war. Also fascinating to
And Europe. Europe also. Right now, what you're watching is literally public theater because Europeans understand that that US is no longer a reliable partner. And since we mentioned Gabbard before, there was a report yesterday that she stopped intel sharing with the Five Eyes on Ukraine issues, blocked the intelligence sharing. So Europeans understand, that their time for the moment is limited and they're doing everything to increase their defense weapons production and secure their borders, build up their militaries. The Eastern European countries are digging trenches along the Baltics, Finland, and whatnot. So they're doing everything to buy as much time as they can for that. Well, Putin is buying time to continue the war, so if he can keep pushing Trump with his 2 weeks, yeah, in 2 weeks we'll have another meeting. Yeah, we'll discuss this in 2 weeks. And Zelensky, obviously, he doesn't want to be ambushed like in February. So yes, I'll meet with Putin tomorrow. Yes, I'm on a plane right now. Where is he? Everyone is playing their part right now. Ultimately, Europe understands the importance, and I'll finish with this. They understand the importance that every single European defense and intelligence agency has come out with an assessment that a NATO country can get attacked by Russia as soon as 2027 to within the next 5 years. So they understand the importance of securing, European borders, of doing everything to increase their own defense weapons productions, of getting their people ready for the case of war and to have, citizens understand that there might be a war within the next 5 years, 3 years on European soil. And Russia's made no secret of it because the latest last week, 12 miles from the NATO border, Russia placed jamming equipment near Estonia. So they have been doing everything to test NATO defenses. They keep, shooting in drones, doing this, doing that, everything to see what the time response is and what the defenses are, how prepared they are.
Olga Lautman, appreciate you taking the time to share your perspective and your expertise. We'll have to leave it there. Not the most uplifting of places to leave it, but we aren't
We'll win.
necessarily here for inspiration. But thank you so much for your time, and to everybody who's watching us live and who is going to watch us when this is posted. We appreciate you taking the time, and yeah. Thanks for being a part of this community.
Thank you for bringing me on, and thank you for putting attention on Ukraine, and thank you, thank you.
All right. All right. And thanks to everybody for supporting Humint, as well as Olga and her Substack. Bye.
Bye, everyone.